Hello my fellow MCs, Primo here, and the Queen of Dot is just a couple days away from gracing our accounts with her presence. It's time to prepare. Today we are talking about Kafka's kit, best Lightcones, traces, relics, and team comps. So let's sit back, grind some Stellar Jade, and let's talk about it.
Good times never last.
Kafka's kit isn't as extensive as Blade's, nor does it require crazy setup to make work. However, it does highlight the fighting style of Dot and how it can be a viable battle strategy moving forward. Her basic attack is pretty standard, dealing lightning damage to a singular target based on her attack stat. Her skill and ultimate are what drives her kit utility and Dot capabilities. Her skill deals lightning damage to the targeted and adjacent enemies, and for the targeted enemy, if they currently have Dot applied to them, it will automatically be triggered upon the use of Kafka's skill, dealing a percentage of the original damage. Say for example you have Sampo and Serval and they apply their respective Dot effects on the enemy. Now what usually happens when Dot gets applied is that the enemy will take Dot damage when their turn comes up. What Kafka's skill opens up is the possibility to trigger those Dot effects outside of the enemy's turn, thus adding to the overall DPS of your team. When Kafka uses her ultimate, she is able to deal initial lightning damage and also apply shock to the enemies. Working similarly to her skill, once shock is applied, they will take a percentage of the original damage of the shock Dot and all other allies' Dot immediately. Her shock effect lasts for the next 2 turns. Her talent utilizes the basic attacks of allies on her team and will launch a follow-up attack that deals lightning damage based on a percentage of her attack. This will also inflict shock on the targeted enemy for 2 turns. Kafka's technique is your typical elemental damage dealing attack that hits a random enemy based on a percentage of her attack stat. Shock will be applied to all enemies for 2 turns and it will deal damage based on her attack stat.
Good times never last.
Kafka's obvious best in slot Lightcone will be her own. Patience is all you need, which grants her a damage percent increase as well as a stackable speed increase, up to 3 times when she unleashes an attack. It will also cause the targeted enemy to take additional shock damage for 1 turn. Another 5-star Lightcone I would recommend is Welt's Lightcone, in the name of the world. This Lightcone synergizes very well with her kit, since Dot is technically considered a debuff. This Lightcone also gives a damage increase to debuffed enemies, and upon use of the holder's skill, it will increase the effect hit rate of the attack, as well as give the holder an attack percent increase. I also wanted to point out that Incessant Rain is usable, but isn't recommended, since the crit rate stat stick is useless on Kafka, since Dot damage doesn't crit. It is best to just leave this Lightcone for Silverwolf. Some of my favorite 4-star options for Kafka are Sampo's Lightcone, Eye of Prey, as well as Pila's Good Night and Sleep Well. Both are gacha Lightcones, with the Eyes of Prey giving an effect hit rate and Dot boost, while Good Night and Sleep Well gives a stackable damage percent boost up to 3 times based on the number of debuffs an enemy has. An underrated option that is F2P is Fermata, which you can make an argument is her highest value option based on how easy it is to obtain, as well as overall utility with her best team comps. This gives her a break effect increase as well as a Dot damage increase for shock and wind shear, which works great with units like herself, Sampo, and Serval. On top of that, being able to superimpose it through the Forgotten Hall shop and Echo of War weekly bosses, this can be a very nice option for all players.
Good times never last.
In my opinion, the priority in which you should level up her traces are as follows. First is her skill, second is her ultimate, third is her talent, and last should be her basic attack, if at all. Her skill is pretty much the go-to when it comes to what drives her kit, since this is what procs the additional Dot damage applied by her team. Making sure to get those damage numbers up when it comes to upgrading this trace is essential to making sure she functions at a high level. Her ultimate is a nice option to level up, and you can make the argument it is of equal priority to her skill. Essentially, it gives bigger damage numbers to that of her skill, but you won't use it as consistently, which in my opinion is why it is just behind in terms of importance. Her talent is pretty good, especially for units that utilize basic attacks and also do Dot damage, which when you think about it, a unit like Natasha fits this description quite well here. But in general, many Dot units like spamming their skill to be able to affect as many enemies as possible, which makes her talent a lesser priority. Her basic attack is last on this list, and I wouldn't even recommend wasting resources on this, as Kafka wants to spam her skill every turn like we discussed earlier. I wanted to quickly point out a bonus ability that she has that used to be her Eidolon 1, which is Torture. After ascending your character twice, it will allow Kafka to be able to trigger all Dot damage from the entire team and not just her own upon the use of her ultimate. This works exactly the same as her skill, and with it now being a trace instead of an Eidolon, it makes her kit astronomically better. This should be immediately unlocked as soon as you get to the certain level requirement.
Good times never last.
Now, best case scenario is that we will get a release in the future that has a Dot specific relic set that enhances those capabilities. Unfortunately, I'm not sure when that will be a possibility, so for the time being, we will have to make do with what we have. In terms of her best in slot set, I would recommend the 4-piece Band of Sizzling Thunder, but for most value and convenience, it's probably better to just go 2-piece Thunder and 2-piece Musketeer or 2-piece MTH. This will give her a 10% lightning damage bonus as well as a 12% attack increase or 6% speed increase respectively, which both stats are vital for her kit functionality. The main stats you will be wanting to grab for her chest piece and boots is attack percent and speed. The reason why she will want attack percent as the main stat is that this is the biggest multiplier for her kit, while dot damage in general doesn't crit. The reason why I would recommend speed boots for Kafka instead of attack percent is because we want her trying to get 2 turns per rotation, so she can use her skill and get 2 procs of your team's dot effects. Substats to aim for when rolling on your relics are attack percent, speed, effect hit rate, and break effect. Attack percent and speed are obvious choices here based on her scaling and her wanting 2 turns per rotation. Effect hit rate is needed for Kafka as she needs a higher percent chance of applying debuffs or her dot effects on the enemies. Break effect is a fine stat to utilize on your Kafka, but it isn't as high of a priority as the other 3 previously mentioned. If you roll crit substats, it's not the end of the world. It will still enhance her personal damage outside her dot capabilities, which will add to her overall DPS. Crit just isn't as useful and needed as the other stats I previously mentioned. For the planar sphere and rope, her best set to utilize is the space ceiling station, with the main stats being lightning damage percent and an attack percent rope. The space ceiling station set will also give you a 24% attack increase if her speed is 120 or higher, and because speed is a prioritized stat for Kafka, she should easily hit this 2-piece set bonus. Another set to consider is the Pan-Galactic Commercial Enterprise, which gives a 10% effect hit rate increase as well as an attack percent increase based on a proportion of what your total effect hit rate is. It's not better than Space Ceiling Station, but it is a usable set for Kafka if you end up having better relic substats.
Good times never last.
The upcoming 4 stars on Kafka's banner are tailor-made for her best in slot team, with units like Luca, Serval, and Sampo all fitting the bill for dot utilization. I think any combo of Kafka and any 2 units of the 3 on her banner would be great. It all depends on enemy weaknesses. Now for survivability purposes, Locha would be a great option, but users have to be aware that his talent does not trigger when dot damage hits an enemy, since it is considered a debuff and not an attack. A unit that I actually really like on this dot team is Natasha, since she herself can inflict bleed on enemies, as well as being very skill point positive. Since many of her teammates end up using their skills, having her to balance out the use of skill points is very helpful. She also has great synergy with Kafka's talent, and she'll be able to proc her follow-up attacks. For a more generic team comp, I can see units like Asta, Welt, or Ting Yun being decent options for different reasons. For a unit like Asta who can apply burn, she can work directly with Kafka's dot capabilities. Not only that, but Asta's skill gives a stackable attack percent boost that works in perfect sync to Kafka's damage scaling. Welt may be an awkward choice here, but hear me out. Not only can he be built for a support role, but he's more than capable of running as a DPS. Combine that with the fact that he can consistently debuff his enemies with his skill and ultimate through the slow state, and that has the potential to work great with Kafka and some of her Lightcone options. This also gives the player a bona fide DPS unit to work alongside all the dot damage being inflicted. Ting Yun is a great choice as an attack buffer through the use of her skill. If you are able to get your hands on a planetary rendezvous Lightcone that enhances the user's elemental damage, you are set to upgrade Kafka even further. It also doesn't hurt that she is a very skill point positive unit. All in all, Kafka isn't restricted to just a pure dot team, as I've mentioned a couple characters outside certified dot units that can work with her. Now, I'm not saying that dot teammates aren't her best in slot, because they are, but having options like Asta, Welt, and Ting Yun show how she can be enhanced on a personal level and not just feed off of other dot characters to get the most damage.
Good times never last.
And with that, this will end our pre-release full build and guide video on Kafka. For all those that are on the fence about Kafka, I can say after analyzing her kit and doing a deep dive, she is amazing. And I think she's going to be a very nice unit to have on your account. Now, is she a meta unit? I'm not so sure about that yet, but considering she isn't just a true main DPS unit, I think she is going to be a lot of fun. But if you like the content, please like and subscribe. Comment down below if you are pulling for Kafka and how many tickets you have saved up for her. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.